Hello, all you lovely people trying to make the world a better place. Welcome to the Dead Man Walking podcast. I'm your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the soon to be released medical trauma memoir. Try that saying three times fast. Um, the summer I died 20 times. Thus, the nickname Repeatedly Dead Fred. I'm here with Vanessa Gowora, and who is a two-time author, and I'm really interested in hearing what she has to say about both her books and how she came to write her books. So, Vanessa, please take it away.
Hi, I'm so glad to be on this podcast.
Glad to have you. You have an amazing smile, by the way.
Thank you so much. One of the things my mom always says is, smile with all your heart. So whenever I smile, I smile with all my heart.
That would be a great book title.
Oh, yeah, that would be a great book title. Should actually put a mental note. Next book title, Smiling with All Your Heart.
Mhm.
That'd be awesome.
So, you're actually in Mauritius right now.
Yes, I am right now in Mauritius, but it's interesting. I wasn't born here.
Mhm.
I grew up I was born and raised in a small African country close to South Africa. Try to guess which country?
Botswana.
No, no, not at all.
No idea.
It's Zimbabwe.
Oh, okay. I have a friend from
Yeah.
Zimbabwe.
Oh, okay, awesome. So you know the whole economic situation, recession, bad stuff. So,
Mhm.
I, despite all that, my parents made sure that I went to the best schools. So I went to the best of the best, like private institutions where, they made sure that they molded us in all three areas: arts, education, and sport. All of us had
Mhm.
to pick a sport. We all had to do, pick like something artistic, and we all had to be good in school. And I went to a really competitive elementary school, and it was very hard for me to fit in because I wasn't good at any of those things. I wasn't good at
Mhm.
sport. I wasn't good at art. I wasn't good at school. So I couldn't really fit in. It had like the cool kid vibe kind of school where, you're either a geek or a nerd, or you're either an athlete, or you're either the studious people. I didn't really fit in. I was like a fish out of water.
Mhm.
But I graduated from elementary school. I went to high school, and then I was there for a year, and then I went to another high school. So before I graduated from high school, I'd been to about 8 to 9 schools in total.
Wow.
And then, like even graduating from high school was a big accomplishment because obviously I had gotten to me the whole digital nomad thing from an early age. Well, I wouldn't say digital, but more of a I developed a nomadic style because
Mhm.
I kept hopping from one school to the next to the next. So when I was 18, 19, I decided to now like go abroad. So my siblings are all overseas. My sister's in America, my brother's in Australia. So
Okay.
I wanted to be as further apart from them as I could. I was like, I don't want to follow in their footsteps. I don't want to be around them. I don't want them to tell me what to do. So I went to Asia, Malaysia. So I
Mhm.
stayed in Malaysia for 2 years. And then afterwards, I went to Switzerland. But during the period from when I was in, like after Malaysia to going to Switzerland, I discovered I had ADHD.
Okay.
So this set me on this whirlwind course of trying to discover who I was and understanding why there were certain things in my past that had happened. Like, oh, okay, it makes sense why I'm a late bloomer. It made sense why I struggled in school. It made sense why I had no balance. It made sense why I used to sleep in class and I used to daydream. My daydream life was more vivid than the actual life. So
Mhm.
it was one of those things. All those things made it became more understandable because like, okay, this is why I have that. But even though I figured it out, I was like, what do I do now? Because I was like, aren't I too late at 23 to go on
23.
medication? Yeah,
Okay.
I felt
Can
like,
I interrupt for a sec? What,
yeah,
were you
sure.
sleeping in cars because it was comfortable or because you were homeless, or why were you sleeping in cars?
No, no, no. So the thing is, like, I get bored easily. So
Okay.
I would sleep in class. I would sleep in any place I felt bored. So I
Okay.
wasn't homeless, but the car thing, like, I could not keep up. Like
Hmm.
10 minutes in a car, if it's a long drive, I was dozing off. So that's
I
why I
can
would focus.
understand
Not,
that.
yeah, I was never into that situation where I was homeless. But yeah, so when at that moment, I then was like, okay, fine. What's next? I don't want to take medication, so I just started learning the steps, to tackle it. It took me a while for me to actually figure it out because I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I don't know what to do. I don't know if to go to a specialist, get help. I don't know whether to take medication. But the thing is, if I went to a specialist, they would say, here's medication. And I didn't want that. So yeah, that's sort of like my little journey that I took.
Okay. So you've lived, all over, I guess, the eastern part of the world compared to where I am in Toronto. Have
Yeah.
you picked up other languages?
I'm terrible with languages. I can
Okay.
speak a bit of French.
Hmm.
But it's interesting. When I was in high school, we had to take a language. So I took Portuguese when I was 14, 15, right? Because
Okay.
it was a must. But now I can only say like three sentences in Portuguese,
Hmm.
after all that. I also took, French in university, but I don't remember much. I went through level A, level two, level three to literally the advanced level where you're supposed to be able to communicate fully in French. But I can't speak French, even though I'm in a French speaking country. I'm still trying
Hmm.
to learn it, but it feels like I've never learned it before. It's that
Hmm.
weird thing. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, didn't I learn French for 3 years? So yeah, it's
So
weird.
I was recently in Montreal for a wedding, and I had to take a cab ride home. So if you don't know Montreal, it's very French, and
Uh,
the it's the hockey capital of Canada. Sorry to you people in
yeah,
Toronto who will disagree. And the team, the Montreal Canadiens, are legendary. I met the only
yeah.
cab driver in Montreal who didn't know what hockey was and didn't know who the Montreal Canadiens were. And
Oh,
he was from Algeria, which is also
uh,
French. So I
yeah.
tried to speak to him in French, and I learned French watching Hockey Night in Canada because it was broadcast in French across Canada. So it's not exactly conversational French, but
Uh,
I was shocked at how much French came back to me while I was
yeah.
trying to talk to this guy. And
Oh,
we
right,
actually
right.
had a bit of a conversation, very entry level, but I think the French is in there. It's just got to find a way for it to come out for you.
You know the thing is, I think for me, language was always a struggle because I can't even speak my my local language,
Hmm.
right? It's a struggle for me to even speak it because even though I'm around it, I forget the words at times. So it's like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, I know this, I know what to say, but it's almost as if I've got like a cloth that's wrapped around the words,
Hmm.
So I don't know if that's because of the ADHD or it's just because I'm just terrible with other languages. I have actually no idea what it is.
Well, you're pretty
So
good at English.
thank you so much. But I wasn't actually good at English. I think it took a while, but also, in my country, English is such an important thing because, like at school, they reinforce it.
Hmm.
You can't pass if you can't speak English, you know, because it's easier for you to write English if you know how to speak it,
Hmm.
you know. So for me, it was one of the things where I had to learn how to speak proper English. So I mean, it was a challenge, but I think for me, one language is enough. Like trying to learn
Hmm.
3 or 4 languages, it's just too much. My brain just can't take it. I'm better with music than I
Hmm.
am with accent language.
Cool. So let's go back to your books. So
Yeah,
you've got two books to talk about. So
yeah.
what are your two books and how did you come to write them?
Okay. So the first book is Success Secrets, and the second book is Flipping It Sideways. So it's part of a series of books that I basically talk about just success, right? So how I came to it was in 2017, I after my discovery and realizing I had ADHD and just going through a lot of self-reflection, I realized I didn't want to do the typical 9 to 5 anymore. I knew that just did not fit anymore with my personality, and it wasn't something that I wanted to go on that journey with, because I had done the whole 9 to 5. I did the whole internship thing, and I hated it because I was always bored. I just kept
Mhm.
looking at the clock, saying, "Oh, when's the time going to run out?" And I would literally have stepped in the office and I'm already looking at the clock.
Mhm.
So, you know, that book led me to figuring out my purpose and my why, because I was like, okay, let me write the book and talk about all the stuff that I have dealt with the last 5 years, from the time I was 23 to the time I was 27, and just talking about it and just saying that this is who I was before and this is who I am now. The person who I was before didn't like change, they didn't like, actually growth, they didn't have a purpose, or they didn't even know what the why was, they didn't know where they were going in their life. So I felt it was so important at that time for me to actually discuss that. And through that process of me writing the book, I actually found my purpose and my why, which is interesting because it wasn't the other way around where I knew what my why was and then I wrote the book. No, it was after.
Mhm.
And Flipping It Sideways is basically a continuation, but it's more of a philosophy that I sort of like developed, that whatever you're going through in life, whether you've got fear, whether you don't know where you're going, you don't have direction, you feel like you don't fit in, you flip it sideways. You look at it like a coin. I'm a huge fan of Roman mythology.
Okay.
And basically, one of the ideas for it was the Roman god, okay? Janus, the god of doors. So I like the whole thing that the coin represented both things, like an open door and a closed door. So that's how
Okay.
I came up to the thing of flipping it sideways, you know,
Okay.
that you gotta flip things both ways. You gotta look at, what is A and what is B? What are you afraid of? How can you conquer that fear? How can you go from step one to step two? So one of the things I talk about in the book was how I overcame my fear of speaking on stage.
Mhm.
And it wasn't through any advanced methodology or processes, or like you had to go through A to Z in order for me to, overcome it. No, it was simply me saying, I'm afraid of public speaking. I'm afraid of, people not liking what I have to say. I'm afraid of being booed off the stage and all that stuff. I was like, okay, fine. How do I deal with it? I'm going to just go on the stage and I'm going to make a speech. And that's pretty much how I got over my fear of public speaking, just by
That's
doing it.
amazing. So,
Yeah.
have you ever been booed off a stage?
Uh, no, not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
I
No,
think
that's
that's
never
a pretty rare occurrence.
it really is. I think you'd
Yeah.
have to be singing and it'd have to be raining. So, so maybe that's when you get booed off the stage.
Mhm. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in if you were a writer of anything before, like just coming up with the ideas, you're going to write a book about how
Yeah.
you became successful. So were you naturally a writer? Was that part of your skill set before? Or how did it come to be that you just said, I'm going to write a book? Because writing a book is really hard.
Oh, it really is odd. The interesting thing is I've been writing books, like actual proper books, since I was 13. I went to boarding school, and I was so bored because I didn't have my handy television in front of me.
Hmm.
And I was like, I could be right now watching Power Rangers, and instead I'm looking at the ceiling.
Hmm.
So that was my first story. My first story was a story about superpowered kids who went on an island. It was very Power Ranger esque because
Hmm.
that was sort of like And I never knew at that time that writing was something that was a gift that I had, because you write as a kid, but the stories you write are so short that no one really says to you that, oh, you are a writer, because
Hmm.
you're all technically writers because you're writing stories because you have to pass. So for me, I did it because I was like, okay, I'm bored and there's nothing to do and I'm disturbing everyone else. So I might as well, do something else. And that's sort of like how it started. And eventually I liked it. I liked how I visualized these worlds. I liked how everyone was so much nicer in my books. you know,
Hmm.
things were so clear and structured, and it just felt like movies, because I'm a big movie fan. I grew up around movies.
Hmm.
And I used to write I still write fantasy and fiction stories, but I would write my stories like movies, because, like I said, my parents made sure that I knew who Martin Scorsese was when I was 10 years old, and who Christian
Okay.
Bale was. So I was the only 12-year-old who knew who all these A-list people were that my friends didn't know. They were like, oh, wait a minute, that's Ridley Scott. He's directing that
Hmm.
movie. And they look at me like, who's Ridley Scott? I'm like, oh, he's that
Hmm.
director. He does all those crime movies. I knew who Dick Wolf was because my mom made me sit down and watch Law and Order. So I literally knew all these people were like before I was 13. So writing just became a natural thing. And I just kept writing and writing and writing. So by the time I was 27, when I wrote my first nonfiction book, I had written so many stories. I can't even tell you how many. There were so many books.
So my ringtone for my brother is the Law and Order theme. So when he calls, I get the dun 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 dun
Oh,
dun dun. Anyway, so are you thinking of
yeah,
publishing any of your fiction fantasy stuff or
yeah.
working on it more?
I've actually sent my first fantasy. Well, it's not my first fantasy book. I really wrote it in 2016, and yeah, long story short, like I had this habit of writing stories and jumping to the next one.
Hmm.
So I was looking back at my catalog and I was like, oh, the one from 2016 that I wrote, I really like it because it's very much like Divergent and I want to, you know, publish it. So I sent my book to get better read, like so that it goes through another stage of editing so that I can publish it before the end of the year.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm in a writers group, and last night we had a meeting, and somebody was going through their historical fiction. So
Oh, wow.
uh, it was interesting, and it had werewolves and vampires and all sorts of stuff. But it took place
That's
in
cool.
England, um, in the I think the 1600s. So
Oh,
this author was basically rewriting history. So he was taking stories that we
yeah,
know, like Van
yeah.
Helsing and
Oh,
the vampire hunter and things like that, and throwing them
yeah.
back and slightly changing them. Um,
I love books like that. I absolutely like books like that where they historical fiction, but they imbue a little bit of fantasy and things that maybe are inaccurate for people who I love history, but I also understand that when you're writing a book, you can sort of like, change things because you don't want your creativity to be blocked, right? By saying, oh, I need to make
mhm.
sure that it goes by the book and everything, should go like according to plan. Like I was watching something the other day, it was about Jack the Ripper.
Mhm.
And I was just imagining, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was a book about Jack the Ripper and he's sort of like this supernatural power, and you had some other person who, to defeat Jack the Ripper, would come and actually, defeat him before that's why he disappeared, because he was killed by this person who, had also powers like,
Mhm.
similar to Jack, but to defeat evil, you need to have like some superpower. But that was sort of like how my brain was going.
Yeah, like a Power Ranger who was at a boarding school.
No, no, no. Well, similar but less Power Ranger. Like the good thing
Hmm.
is I have sort of like graduated from writing Power Ranger stories. I can't
Hmm.
even tell you how silly and cheesy and cliche when I started writing my stories were like. They were really, yeah, very cliche.
I'm sure they're amazing. You can put like a
Being
little compendium together and sell them to the young adult market.
you
So,
know, I never saved those books for whatever reason. I would write and then I would actually throw them away. The other time I was trying to look for them and I couldn't find them. I think because at that time, everyone I met thought I copied from other writers. So I when you're 13, you want a support system. You want people to be like, oh, you
mhm.
should go for it. But I didn't really have that. Everyone, they'd be like, oh, you can't be a writer, you probably just took a book and wrote the story and pretending it was
Yeah.
yours. And I was like, it doesn't make any sense. But I was like, okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, if people want to find your books or to find you, where would they go?
Okay, so they can go to my main website, Vanessa Gowora, but they can also find my books on Amazon as well. Just type in Vanessa Gowora and the two books will pop up.
Okay, so the for people who perhaps cannot listen as fast as you can talk, you want to spell out your name, please?
Yeah, sure. Vanessa, two S's, and Gowora, Gowora.
Perfect. Thank you. So, is
Yeah.
there anything else you want to talk about? Anything?
Um, I'm an open book. You can ask me any question. I'm an open book.
Okay, so you've given up the 9 to 5 lifestyle. So
Yeah.
what do you do in your 9 to 5 hours now? So do you have your own business? Are you just becoming an author?
Yeah. I've got basically two things running. I've got my author business, which is my fantasy business, but I also help people start their businesses from their passions because, I'm a person who believes that passions can truly impact the world, like following them head on. So
Mhm.
those are my two businesses. Yeah.
I think most people don't realize that for many of us, writing a book actually becomes a business. And,
Yeah.
it's a business unlike any other business in the world. Um, you're a content creator and you have to learn how to do podcasts and how to edit and how to do this. And, you know, I'm just supposed to be writing a book. Well, no, you've got to market the book and you've got to learn PR and you've got to learn how to
Yeah.
sell and all these things that go with it. So I can see how you've taken that and transferred those skills into helping other people, which is, I think, is a great idea. So, in addition to emerging authors like yourself, I used to be a business professor. So I
Oh,
love learning about, small businesses, especially ones that are killing it in this market. Because,
yeah.
the old adage is if you can start a business that survives a recession, you've got a really good business.
That is so true. And one of the things that I've learned in doing all this, like starting my author business and starting my other business, right, is it's so dynamic because you go into it with one idea of what you think you're going to get, and then the exact opposite happens. You end up realizing that, oh wait, I need, like you said, right, I need to learn marketing, I need to learn Facebook, I need to learn social media, I need to go on podcasts. I'm an introvert, but in order
Oh,
for
yes,
me to
that's
be
so obvious.
really, how's it obvious?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I had to like learn so many things. I'll give you an example. For my author business, after I finished writing it, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that it shines. But at that moment, I didn't have enough money to get a cover designer. So I had to learn how to do that for myself.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning here about how you went to school where you had to do art and now you're doing art, designing covers for your books, how you have to become a writer, which is art.
Yeah.
So, you know, things were just there and you just couldn't access them at the time.
That is so true. That is so true. I think I've always had a grasp for art, but maybe at that time I just it wasn't out there yet. It wasn't at the surface. It was still underneath the surface. And I just
Hmm.
needed that push to actually get it on top. Because in
Hmm.
order for you to design a book cover, you need to have some sort of art aesthetic, right?
Hmm.
Because they book cover designers who, well, authors who try to do their own book covers and it looks like a mismatch of something else. For me, I found it easier to design a cover because maybe I had that experience with art, but at that moment, maybe there was no one who could actually hone it in, I guess.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
it's worked out for you. So, Vanessa, this is my least favorite part of the podcast because we're soon running out of time.
All
So,
right.
I'd like to put you on the question wheel right now. So, can you pick a number from 1 to 30? And we're going to find a question for you.
Oh, okay, cool. I will go with my favorite number, number 15.
Number 15. Okay. What characteristics do your friends all have in common?
Oh, wow, okay. They're all creative. Uh, they're all patient. They're all
Hmm.
loving.
Hmm.
They're all generous. They're all business oriented.
Interesting. Do you know who Malcolm
Yeah.
Gladwell is? He's a
No.
Canadian author, and
Oh, okay.
one of his uh, belief systems is as you get older, your personality and behaviors become the composite of the 5 or 7 or 10 people you spend the most time with.
Oh,
So all your friends having similar characteristics, uh, you know, I suppose those are all characteristics of you, right? You're generous and you're creative and you know all those things. So it doesn't surprise me
oh,
that's a package you've surrounded yourself with.
yeah. I mean, I guess you're right. I think it's one of those things where you attract what you resonate with. Like that's why you see, writers, they attract each other like
Hmm.
magnets. The same
Hmm.
thing with musicians, the same thing with beer, well, lesbians, right? It's the same thing. Even people who are business oriented, they attract each other like magnets. So
Hmm.
it is true what it is. The older you get, you surround yourself with people you resonate well with.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the end of our time. So Vanessa, I thank you so much. I'm so happy I got to meet you. I know we had a couple of reschedules. I appreciate
That's
your patience, and I'm thrilled. I hope you're very successful.
oh,
And
thank
one
you.
last time, if you want to give people where they can find you, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, sure. VanessaGowora.com. My surname Gowora. And also on Amazon, you just type my name in and the books will pop up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please click the likes, subscribes, and all those other buttons that all the cool kids tell you to punch and smash and do all that crazy stuff. Share and give Vanessa's books a look and support emerging authors. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Bye bye.